I have the honour, the pleasure to introduce a friend, Loredana de Lucchio. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Very good. I got one for one today. We've been collaborating here with Design Principle Practice for nearly, over a decade, probably closer to 15 years. You can read her bio, but the most important thing about Loredana is her combination of theoretical concepts and practical applications. She has a wonderful conceptual foundation to offer us tools to think about the world. And the other great quality is she's not only a creator and thinker herself, but she's also somebody who knows how to organise people. So she's now, are you chair of your department? Or yes, so there we go. So she's a wonderful combination, and we're always grateful to have her and hear what she's thinking about now. So over to you.
Okay, good morning to everybody, and thank you to be here. And I'm very happy to have my speech after the COSEP, because today I want to share with you some reflection about design, the new agenda for design education. And why I want to talk with you about that, because let me introduce what I'm doing, about myself. I'm a small professor, a full professor in Sapienza. Sapienza is the biggest university in terms of people, professors, students, maybe not only in Italy, in Europe at all, I don't know in the world, but it seems like that. We have 3,050 professors, 11 faculties and so on. And what is design with this condition is a very, very small element. We are within the Faculty of Architecture. We have one bachelor program, 2 master degree, and a PhD course. Now we are launching a new PhD program, but as you can see, we are within this board. And therefore, this is a strange situation, because we are lucky because we can collaborate with all disciplines. But at the same time, each day, each moment, we have to ask what we are doing, which is the difference between us as a designer and other disciplines. And in particular, what we can give to our students. Because in the research activities, our role is quite clear. For example, in Sapienza we have an interdepartmental center. The name is Sapienza Design Research. Lorenzo is the director. Lorenzo is the director of this center. And in this center, for example, 11 different departments from humanities to technologies to medical collaborate together in the design research. And as you can see, according to your also work and all the speeches in these conferences, we can understand that at the research level, the role of design, I think, is quite clear. But what about education? The question of the last question of my previous keynotes, it was interesting. Which are the skills that we have to give to our students in order to face the challenges that we have today? Because typically our programs, especially in Italy, do you know, design in Italy is quite famous, is connected with the classical approach of design. Graphic design, communication design, product design, interior design, and so on. But what about this? This is a part of the sort of whole world. And what we can do as new. And in Sapienza, I'm working and chairing from the academic year 2013-2014 the master degree in product and service design. At the beginning, the master of science was only, the name was in product design, and then we changed it to product and service design to, in some way, update the content, not just the name, but the content. But at the end, what we are promising to our students that we have them to work in order to change the world in better, because we are living in a complex world, and therefore we can to rethink about places, tools, habits, to the school, the problem is that the students, when arrive, and the students, our graduates, it seems that they are more connected with the classical definition of design. Maybe they become a service designer, UX designer, or sometimes product designer and so on. But what about the complexity that we try to explain to them? But in particular, which are the topic, the learning part that they have to develop. So we decided some years ago to launch a sort of observatory, a research field, intends to learn from the practices what we call the principle of education, rather than to develop the principle towards the practices. Typically, we say principle and practices. We try to say, what about the practices and what we can learn from the practices and to bring in the principle in the education part. So, in order to, we decided to organize these activities not only as faculties, as a professor, but we involved also some of our students, because in Sapienza, I suppose each program has the possibility to select the most students in our course, 4 students per year, that are the best one, and they have the possibility to have a special degree with a special learning path. We involve these students in this learning path, because for us it's a sort of also a training, this observation. And we asked to them to observe what's happening outside to the school, in the real world, in the professional world, and then to understand what they need to learn in the school in order to arrive there. And of course, we start from an observation of what's happening in the design now, and I want just to share with you some very common new feature of the contemporary conditional design, especially very renowned for us that make research about that. And of course, the first one is that we are not anymore in a very unique system like in the capitalistic one or in the industrial one. Therefore, everybody say that design has to be flexible, adaptable, and so on. And design has to develop new behaviors. Okay, good. This is one of the most important challenges that we have to face off. Another one, the question that we are not anymore in a world that is physical and material. We are in both of them. We are in the digital world, maybe, and therefore we have to rethinking about the definition of classic definition, product design, service design, communication design. What's happening? Is everything together? And moreover, that now we are not anymore in a purchase system, but we are in a sharing system. It seems that the knowledge, especially the knowledge, but also the product, everything, could be part of the sharing process rather than the classical idea that I produce, this is my project, I sell you, and you pay me for that. And so where the profit come from in this new situation? Another question that we faced was about the idea that now the process maybe a little is more important than products, and because typically product innovation and process innovation are divided, but now we know that maybe the innovation is more in the process rather than in the product, the final product, the results. And moreover, that everybody say, okay, design is not anymore a problem solver, but it's a problem finder. We have to find problem before to find to develop a solution. And another question is about the 4 dimension of the design activities. Typically, design works with the 3 dimension. 2 dimension if work in the immaterial part of our work, and the 3D dimension if we work with the product. But of course, we know that there is a 4 dimension, that is the time. Time is a question that, especially in education, is quite important, because we work with people that maybe will be designer in the next 30 years, in the next 40 years. Therefore, if use some topic or try to learn to our students how to design, but how can we know how they have to design in the next future? And of course, the question of future is quite important. And the question of future bring on the table another question, the question of utopia. Because the future, it could be an idea. We don't know how the future could be. And in the last 5 years, we understand that maybe a lot of our convincement are completely destroyed. Now we have a war, we have a healthcare crisis, I don't know. Therefore, we have to rethink about the vision of the world and the future, but now we cannot say that we can offer one vision for all over in the world. We have to work in a small vision, a small utopia. And there was a lot of philosophers that discuss about the idea of minimalist utopia. So, starting from this very renewed question and challenges, we decided to observe what's happened outside from the school in the practical activities according to 4 challenges. The first one is the social challenges, the second biological challenges, technological challenges, and economic challenges. And we proceed with this sort of mapping activity that starts from understanding the outcomes of the design activities, therefore from the practices, and then we move to understand a little bit some of them, and then to try to find some principles that are useful for us to define new pattern, new learning pattern. And therefore we ask to the students that we involve to search interesting case studies around these topics, to make as more as possible interview directly to the designer that work in this project. And therefore, what we are searching on are real projects, exactly like the example of the previous keynote speaker, to understand what they are really doing and how the design work in this situation. Because sometimes we find a lot of example of the design activities, but if we ask if there are designers in these teams, sometimes they miss designer. Maybe the innovation in design is made by other people from other competencies and other disciplines. Because now, maybe, as we know, design is a very large word with a lot of meanings. So, starting, that's what I want to tell you now is the results of this idea, this work, and starting from the social challenges, per each of the fields of research, we decided to define 2 limits. And therefore, for example, in this case, we are searching about the social challenges in terms of abilities and skill that the people involved develop, and the knowledge that they create and leave to the society. So at the beginning we mapped 34 case studies. We focus on some projects, and then we try to define a new possible learning path. Of course, per each of the case study we develop sheets to describe this then, and for the focus project, we go in deep to understand exactly they work on, and we make an interview with the designer. And for example, one of the projects in these fields was about the IDEO project, where, for example, they work in order to bring in this local community with the low-tech community some of the opportunity of the high-tech. And therefore the idea is to downsize the technologies in order to allow the people to understanding and to manage these new technologies, in order to improve, in this case, the agricultural process, and therefore to improve the possibility to produce more food for the communities, but local community again. It's not a question of big company. And then after that, we, of course, organize the results and findings in a sort of a visual map. And around the concept of sociability, we find several possible learning paths. And what are for us these learning paths? Are exactly the knowledge that in the educational fields we have to give to our students, the skill that we have to try to develop in our graduate students to help them to work in these fields. And therefore, for example, in this case, we work about the concept of community, of course technology, but also equity, healthcare, educational, and humanitarian knowledge and integration. And therefore, this means that, as you can see, it's not a question of design. It's a question of how the other disciplines can help design to be a different designer. And in this sense, we decide to give a definition of this different idea of design. And for example, we decide this is just an idea which can change it, but for the moment, the new taxonomy of this learning path, is about the useful design. Design that can be used, not only design that is innovative and so on. And which are the most important goal of this learning path is to understand how to improve the quality of life, to develop society and not just to develop a product or a service, and to work about the concept of incremental innovation. That is a little bit different, for example, is in between the social innovation and technological innovation. Incremental means that you improve the situation step by step. Moreover, for example, another important part is that this kind of design has to reflect and to be able to work in a new social cultural phenomenon that is related with the phenomenon of spread knowledge and distribute production, and therefore the idea that we are in the knowledge economy, not anymore an economy of classical economy system. And therefore, another important point of a useful design is to be a society-centered design. That is a little bit more an upgrade of the human-centered design or humanitarian-centered design. Society means that in the society is involved also the question of policy making and so on. And this is another specific goal of this learning path. And finally, the idea of cooperation. That is not exactly co-design at all, because sometimes in the co-design processes what's happened is that we arrive as a designer, we are able to give the possibility to people to speak and so on, but the cooperation, I think, is the concept that is more strong, because you have to cooperate with the other. You put in the same level designer, people, but also the institution, and also the company, the people that put money in the system. Therefore, the idea is to cooperate everybody all together, and therefore to arrive to the idea of social sustainability. So, after that, we move on another sphere, in the sphere of biological challenges, and we put as a limit the idea of a human and a non-human, and everybody know about that. Again, we analyze some projects, we focus on some specific project, and for example, I want to just to spend a few words about this one, that as you can see seems a very technological, high-tech project, that seems like for astronaut or something like that for space, but at the end this is an underwear that is designed to help elderly to live, to have an active aging life. But the idea is that this is for the new elderly. the elderly of the next future, that maybe they are able to use technologies. Some of us becomes elderly in the next future. Therefore, the idea is that we not just to think about elderly as a past, but elderly as a future. And of course, in order to work in these fields, for example, questions related with the economy, with the fashion also, new materials, technologies, hard to put all together. And according to this, we find some questions, some again learning paths within this sphere, and we find that the most important, the question related with ecology, technology, of course, aesthetics. Aesthetics becomes a part of this learning path, healthcare again, and material and new material. And we decide to call this new, this specific skill of design as adaptive design. Because the idea is that, okay, you have to work together with the other scientists, with the other knowledge. You cannot work alone, as also the previous keynote speech say. And design as a symbiotic role. Symbiotic means that our function is possible only if we work with the others. And we are not to focus on the idea that we have to produce for human, but we have to produce new nature. And if we are producing new nature, maybe also the ethical and moral questions are within design. Design has to be, we have to help the students to understand the ethical path. And finally, the idea that if you are adaptive because you are not to add something to the system, to the ecosystem, but we have to within the ecosystem. Therefore, the idea of biomimesis or bio-inspired is not a question of biomimesis product or bio-inspired material. It's a question of biomimesis strategy and the bio-inspired approach. Therefore, we are part of the ecosystem, not outside the ecosystem. Go on. Other case study, other focal project, a learning path, this time in the fields of technological challenge. And we put in this, as a limit in this field, the idea that the two concepts of system and community, because system is a question of technologies maybe, and community is a question of people, but both of them are the idea that we are in a networking system, in a networking context. Case study and some of the projects. For example, this is quite interesting because before that Alexa arrived in our home, these teams of designers think a sort of new robots, especially for the elderly and for the old women, because according to the statistic, especially in the major world but all over the world, the women live more than the men, and therefore it's possible that a lot of women live alone, and they don't want to leave their house, they don't want to move to the parents' daughter or sons and so on, or to move in some structure. And therefore the idea to help them to live alone, to continue to live alone without feel to be alone in some way. And again, we work with the analysis of the map, and in this case, of course, technology puts on the table the knowledge related with the new technologies, and in particular the idea of, for example, IoT, the idea that we are based on a very digital infrastructure, and of course the question of robotics, and again also in this case the question of new material. And how we call this field of design activities as adaptive, additive design, exactly a little bit different from the previous one, because additive design means that you have to add something to the human being. a sort of design prosthesis, but prostheses are not physical prostheses, but also psychological one. And in this case, the additive design has to work with technologies, but thinking that we are not technological humanity, we are biological humanity, and therefore that the technology is also a question of society, it's a question of culture. Technologies is not just a question of innovation or new possibility. When we change innovation, we change the technologies, we are changing also how the people live. And of course, the idea that we are within, in this moment, in a digital culture. Digital culture not means also to use internet. A digital culture means that we have the possibility to dematerialize our world more than before. But at the same time, these kinds of the learning path has to work in the idea that the production is not anymore within the big factory, big companies, but there is the possibility to produce innovation also outside the company, in the society. And of course, if we come back on the big companies, in the big companies maybe now the production is not anymore a question just to produce and to transform material, but sometimes to change the way the people works. And therefore the idea to have a smart factory, the cobot, that is the robot that collaborates with people and so on. Therefore in this case design has to focus on the idea how technology, as I said before, is something that adds possibility to humanity. And the final one is about economy. Again, the research and some case studies. For example, this focus project, it was quite interesting for us because these teams in 2013 decided to reflect about the home appliance that now is a sort of disposable product, because the life of this product is very short, we cannot repair it anymore, and the materials that are used are very cheap. And therefore the idea, what's happening if we reflect on products as a product that has to have a more long life. And so they decide to design new appliances, for example the bread toaster with the hard material, with the iron, for example. Iron is more strong material and is more, how can I say, long life material rather than the plastic. And with another approach, the idea that you can substitute the singular part of the devices, the appliance, if we broken, with just a very simple action, not without use the expert people, but just okay to recharge it like a battery. You can change battery, but you can change also some part inside because you can work on it. And why this is part of the design economy? Because change the way how to consider where the profit comes from. And in this case, the most important parts that the students have to face in order to work in these fields of design is about the new manufacturing, new and old manufacturing, the distribution system, the rules, the law, and how we can produce and use the products and the services all. And of course it is a question of the work, how the people work in the system. For example, the problem in this moment also is a political and social one, that there is one part of the world where the people are very poor worker. They are work without any protection from the government, from any welfare system behind. And in our rich part of the world, we use the product that they work, that they develop. Therefore, I think that in this case, design has to work to have the possibility to understand also this is kind of a question. And finally, of course, the question, the balancing between demand and offer, the classical balance of demand and offer in the market. And in this case, the most interesting word that describes this approach of design for us is conscious design. Because it is a question to focus that design is not an isolated element in the system. Okay, we can change everything, but change is complex. The system is complex, and therefore we have to be conscious of how the complex works. And there are some important questions related to this. For example, the idea of long tail, the 6 degrees separation, the idea of the free economies, and the question of capitalistic economy, post-capitalistic, or new economy, and several different kinds of economies that maybe are always the same system, and therefore we interact with them. Typically, as you know, design born in the industrial economy, the capitalistic economy. I produce something, I sell something, and design has to be able to help the companies to sell more and more. But we are in another kind of economies, and we have to change our system. And finally, what we arrive, this is not just the final point, this is just an ongoing process. And maybe in the next years, maybe we can change also this. But it's important for the educational part to reflect which are exactly, or not exactly, but we arrive to the more important skill that our students need to have. Because, as we said, to talk again on simply design is not enough. To talk again on the classical definition design, product, service, but also the new one like UX designer and so on. Sometimes it's not exactly what the society wants, and sometimes it seems that other disciplines can do this better than us. For example, in the field of UX design, a lot of the psychologists work on it. And therefore, we decide to understand which is the new education for the next designer, and for the moment, this is our possible solution, or we try to do that. And thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much, Loredana. Okay, questions? Or was it a hand, not a hand? Come on, let's be brave. Don't be shy. Don't be shy, it's a big room. Yes.
That was fabulous, so thank you so much. So Loredana, my question is to do with probably the last part of that, the conscious design.
Yeah.
And the CEO or the director of the Lincoln Center in New York urged us not to move fast and break things. He talked about basically to move thoughtfully and improve things. So my question is really about the ethical and responsible innovation with what you've just said, and maybe you could speak a little bit more about that. What's within that conscious aspect, because that's very important and for me the most intriguing thing that I'm seeing on the presentation. So thank you.
I don't know if I understood the question. Well, the question is why the last one, ethical, is not present. This is the question. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So as I can see, we try to consider which is most important, which are the most important questions inside. And of course, maybe the ethical question is important for all of them. But we believe that in the last one, maybe inside of the economic question is also including the ethical one, because maybe I don't say clearly before, what we are searching on is how the other disciplines can help us to make better designer. And the colleagues that work in the new economy face the problem of ethical. And it's not a question of philosophical ethics, it's a question of economic ethics in this case. And therefore we focus on the idea on demand, labor, distribution as a part of the economic knowledge that bring the ethical question within design. While when we write exactly the idea of ethics that is exactly in the social one, but also in the technological one, each time there is a different approach, I think. And ethics maybe is a very basic knowledge, but depends which knowledge based on the ethics question. Because if we involve, for example, and sometimes we try to do that, especially in the part of useful design, people that works in the law, in order to understand how we can, in the local community, can we bring innovation, because sometimes there is a sort of contradiction between the design action and what is possible from the political point of view. In that sense, the ethical questions are related also with the cultural one, for example, related with the question of religion, a question of how do people live or believe something. And therefore, each time depends which is the ethical question. But in this case, we consider that in the economic part, the question of ethics is related with the economic matter at all, not isolated. Therefore, for these reasons, we not highlight ethics as one of the learning part.
Should have stayed here.
Thank you very much. This is fascinating, and I'm just curious to ask, looking at your classification, can you possibly have useful, adaptive, or additive design without having conscious design? Is it foundational, in other words?
Okay, this is a good question, and it's also the question that we reflected on. As I said at the beginning, we are working on this on master level. And as you know, master level are just 2 years in Europe, and in 2 years we cannot just do imagine that we change everything. Therefore, the idea is to focus on what. And of course, the best solution is that we arrive to have a designer that is useful, adaptive, additive, and conscious. This is the main goal. But what's happened in 2 years? And in Europe, in 2 years, we have to offer 120 credits. And what is possible to do? And typically, if you see the list of the program in Italy, especially in Italy, but also in Europe, we said, okay, this is a program on product design, this is a program on classical one, communication, graphic, UX, social service design now. There are a lot of programs in service design. But the problem is, in 2 years, what we are focused on. And so for these reasons, we try to understand different parts in order to help the people to acquire some approach, the main one. Then, of course, it depends by their continuous life, and maybe they arrive to be all together. For example, there is a big debate in Italy in this moment about the idea of what design is. And of course, we have a strong tradition about the idea of Renaissance designer like Leonardo, no? Which is everything. Designer that can be able to change the world. Designer that arrives as a hero, that arrives in the society and change everything. But unfortunately, it's not exactly the real situation. And there are a lot of frustration in our students, our graduate students, not only our students. I think in the students, they graduating in design in this moment, feel a sense of frustration, because we say today to them, you can change the world, but when you go out to the school, how they can change the world. And if they're lucky, like the students of my colleagues before, that go directly in a good company, okay, but exactly what they have to tell to the new design agency in order to say, I'm able to do that. In fact, in this moment, the most interesting design agency are connected with the school, IDEO, with Stanford, exactly the example. But if, as in Italy, as academics, we cannot have a design studio. For example, this is a specific law in Italy. If we are academics, we are not professional. We can use research as a profession, and we do that. We make a lot of research, but it's always a different situation rather than competitive market. And we have to, our idea is to understand very well what they can do. Therefore, my reply is, it's the main goal to arrive to have all together, but in 2 years it's quite impossible.
One question that I had is, with Sapienza Design Research as a kind of cross-disciplinary organisation, have you tried to apply these, or like to take these to other fields or other disciplines, and to see how they have responded to these?
Yes. As I said before, the interdepartment center, Sapienza Design Research, is focused on research. Therefore, we involve the PhD students, and we work with 11 different departments, from humanities to technologies, and also in our Master of Science there are a lot of, we are 20 academics in the Master of Science, and we are only 4 in the design fields. Therefore, the other comes from aesthetics, for example, engineering, computer science, psychologists, medicine, and so on. But the problem is not how each discipline grow, how each discipline can help us as a designer. The problem is what the students can have to learn in order to improve their skill in this direction. And sometimes it is not enough, because it's a very limited time, 2 years, to arrive to this goal. And okay, we can start from the beginning, but in the bachelor level, typically, and I'm convinced that is a right position, we try to give the very basic tools for the design activities, related with the capability to change it, to work in more connected with the classical design. And it is at the master level that I think is quite complicated. But the design, as I said before, the condition of Sapienza is good for the research, but a little bit stressed for the design activities, because for education activities. Because in Sapienza there are, I don't know how many programs in all fields, and sometimes these programs are a little bit connected with what we consider design activities, and therefore the difference when the students arrive in Sapienza and decide to study one program rather than another, sometimes say, okay, what exactly, is it clear what they do in the medicine fields, is it clear what they do in the other fields, but exactly what they are learning on in the design program. That's our strange situation. Okay.
We have time for 1 or 2 more questions if anyone else has it. I know there was a lot to digest.
Yeah. No, of course.
Well, look, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to send us all off to coffee. Loredana is going to be there, and we can continue the conversation there. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tengo el cuello, pues todavía me está matando. thing.
Ci vede, ci guarda,